Okay, this is your third and final video going over the setup of arguments. And the last one was kind of long. Sorry about that. It was more than what I wanted it to be, but just a lot of information, a lot of examples. And again, go back through your textbook when you're reading it and make sure that you kind of follow with your textbook as you're going through these videos. It will really help you understand it. If you need to go back and reread or rewatch one of the videos, that's a great way to be able to get this information, because it is somewhat confusing sometimes to get everything to understand it. Okay, we're going to talk about the last of the two arguments now. Okay, and that is inductive reasoning. Okay, we got through deductive reasoning. Remember, deductive reasoning, the key there is that deductive reasoning must have that truth-preserving argument put in it. Okay, and remember, what truth-preserving means is that it must be valid. The premises have to be valid. If they are valid, and that means then that the conclusion will be valid. Now, remember, the word valid does not mean factually true. It means theoretically true in philosophy. So if those statements, those premises, those reasons that you're making for your argument are valid, theoretically true statements, then the conclusion will be. That's a deductive reasoning argument. In inductive reasoning now, that is not the case, okay? You cannot guarantee that its premises are true, nor can it guarantee that the conclusion will also be true. It's only saying that it will be probably true. The intent is to provide only probable support to its conclusions. Okay, inductive reasoning is really used when it comes to scientific investigation. It's kind of the guiding light of scientific investigation, because in science, especially, and even in philosophy, that we're going to get into a lot of these, and in other areas of sciences as well, there isn't those absolute truths. So you're only going off of what you believe to be true, you hope to be true, and then you give that supporting conclusion to it. And then once you test your theory or test your hypothesis through scientific investigation, you will find out whether or not it's actually valid or not. And that's kind of the setup of inductive reasoning then, and the ideas behind it then, and how it comes into play. Inductive reasoning is likely to come by way of induction. That's where it comes from, the term from it. It allows us to give reason from evidence that we have in hand to new knowledge, new conclusions that are being established from the degree of probability, not from the degree of actuality then. Okay. Inductive reasoning have basically two different elements in terms of whether or not it's a strong or weak argument. If the strength of the premises are true and it increases the likelihood of its conclusion, then you would say that you have a very strong inductive argument. Okay. Um, in order for you to have what's called a cognacy or a cognizant argument, then it must not only be strong, but all the premises must in fact be true. Now this goes back to the concept of, it's not like being sound. In a way it is, but in inductive reasoning you call it cognacy. Okay. So again, you could have, instead of saying the terms valid or invalid or sound or unsound, as you would for deductive. For inductive, your argument is how strong or weak is the argument, and then how cognizant or incognizant is the argument. One that fails to provide support in the premises is going to be a weak inductive argument then. It allows for reason from evidence in hand to new knowledge. The whole purpose behind inductive reasoning isn't so that you have all these true statements. That's the purpose of deductive. Inductive is the purpose is to be able to test, to challenge, to look into. So many of the inductive reasoning arguments are going to end up becoming false. But the idea that is to learn new ideas from it and to get new concepts from it then. An example of all this, let me give you one. Let's say that I go to a college, and while I'm at the college, I meet 10 students as I'm walking through, and I introduce myself to them, and they introduce themselves to me. Half the students that I met at this college that I was at turns out to be agnostic. So I meet 10 students, I talk to them. Of those 10 students, 5 of them end up being agnostic in their religious belief. Based upon that premise, okay, then my conclusion is half of all the students at this college, they must be agnostic. Okay, well, we already know that in deductive reasoning, that would be a not just an invalid statement, but an unsound statement, and it would not have any holding to it. But in inductive reasoning, because I have not been able to go out and to test anything, I'm just giving a general hypothesis from what knowledge I do have, from the limited knowledge I have, from going to this college and meeting 10 students. Half of them are agnostic, half of them were not. I'm jumping to a conclusion that would say then, based upon what knowledge I have, I'm going to give a conclusion that all of the students at this college, half of these students would be agnostic then. Once I would test that and actually go around to all the college students and find out if it comes back that half of them are agnostic, then my premises are going to be true or stronger to be true, and I'm going to have a very strong argument that is also cognizant because it's also factually true. Another example that you can get into is from your book. It gets into this idea um, and it talks about some of the different examples as well. Now, there are 3 basic types of inductive reasoning. Okay, the first type is what's called enumerative induction. This is reasoned by group or target to a conclusion of a single member. The reason from single to form a conclusion of a group itself. It can go either way. Enumerative induction deals with having a less representative sample. The smaller you have, the weaker your conclusion. Okay, so the example I just kind of gave you, that would be an example of enumerative induction, dealing with the students and the religious beliefs. Then I had a very small select group number, 10 out of, let's say, 900 that I picked from, so it's going to be a very weak form of a conclusion then. Okay, less representative the sample, the weaker the conclusion. This leads to a lot of poor conclusions. That's called hasty generalizations. They're weak conclusions of a target group from a sample that causes a lot of errors. And this happens a lot. It happens a lot in politics. It happens a lot in life. You will hear people come out with all kinds of statements about things which they have no factual basis on or very limited factual basis on, and it's very untrue. Again, going back to the Muslims, okay, there are there is something like 1 point some billion Islamic people in the world that believe in the Muslim faith. Okay, of that, a very, very small, okay, percent are actually terrorists. Okay, probably even less than 1%. But if that's all we see and hear about is that little tiny fraction of that total number, then we make a jumping conclusion, a hasty generalization that, well, then all of them have to be terrorists. That's what gets us in trouble. That leads to prejudices, discriminations, racisms, and other types of problems. The second type of inductive arguments is reasoning by analogy. It's using 2 things that are similar in some respects to be similar to an unexpected result. The example I have here, watches are made by a watchmaker who are intelligent designers. The universe is like a watch, so therefore the conclusion is that the universe must be made by an intelligent designer. Again, that's jumping to a massive conclusion based upon 2 very weak types of premises then, okay? Because the universe is not like a watch. Okay, the universe is much more intricate, much more specially designed than a simple watch would be. So to make those jumps, those leaps like that, to reason by that is going to be a very problematic thing to do. So again, you have to be careful of how strong these 2 items are here in their premises. The strength of these is going to determine the strength of your conclusion then. If these are weak, your conclusion is going to be weak. Also, if one of these or both of these are false, not just weak, but false in their factuality, then your conclusion is going to be false as well. So you have to be very careful about that. All right, the third type of inductive reasoning is what's called inference to the best explanation. Okay, and a really good example of this where you'll watch the video on is Sherlock Holmes, who does this all the time, and your book talks about this quite a bit. So what inference by explanation is giving a reason from a series of premises about a situation, which the explanation is about why facts are as they are. The conclusions then take the facts and they create a probability that has no guarantee of truth. However, under the inference of best explanation, if the explanation given is well done, then the argument will be very strong. If not, it's going to be weak. If the premises are factually true, then the argument would also be very cogent. Okay, major uses of this form is done in science and ethics and law, everyday life, where you may be talking to your child, let's say, and you come in the kitchen and there on the countertop is the broken cookie jar and there's crumbs all over the floor and there is your child sitting there with crumbs all over their shirt. Okay, and they're holding a broken cookie in their hand. Okay, well, you didn't see them actually eat the cookies or reach for the cookie jar or break the cookie jar. But based upon all the facts that you could put down in order as you're talking to your child and asking them, did they break the cookie jar to get the cookies, and they say no, you could go through, by inference of best explanation, a series of premises of facts going down in line to reach the conclusion that yes, it was your child, that child that did it, even though it may not be. You may end up maybe false that your second child come in and did it and set up the evidence against the first one to blame them. But that's the whole idea behind inference of best explanation. Okay, so that finishes up our presentations on all parts of arguments, and we will go over some many examples in class and do some activities over it as well.